Hey guys, Caring About for American Crime Story, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, Episode 3, The Dream Team, and I, of course, was really looking forward to this episode. The first two episodes really were great, but this really, I think, was the start to the show. I mean, last week's episode, yes, it was a great episode, and most of it was the chase. It was stuff we already saw. It was just kind of seeing what was inside the Bronco, but this really is setting up what I think the show is going to be. This was a great episode. I really love this episode. There were so many things I loved about this episode. And like I said, the thing I'm loving most about the show is that we're really seeing every side of the case. Every side. And this episode really showed that it could end up being lawyers versus DEA, which I really like seeing. But let's just get into this episode because, like I said, it was really great. There's a lot to get into. And especially if the case, went like this. It really is making me wonder, did the case really go like this when Simpson's trial happened? Is this actually how it played out? I mean, it's very interesting. So we start right off with Robert is with the Kardashian, who's taking them out to a restaurant to eat for Father's Day. You guys know how much I hate these kids. I will say I think the kids who play them, they're doing a good job at showing how annoying the Kardashians are, because it's clear that these Kardashians, and I don't know if this really is how they act in real life. I think it's pretty damn close, but I'm pretty sure that these Kardashians, what they're trying to show is that these Kardashians care about fame. They care about fame, they care about, being famous, and they're very, very bratty. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but they came across as extremely bratty to me in this episode. And you guys might not have seen that, but I really did. And I definitely thought that, like I said, that they were very bratty, and I definitely really got that vibe here. I don't know about you guys, but that's how I saw this scene, at least. So basically, they go into a restaurant, and the waitress obviously recognized him from the case, but they call him Richard Cardovian, and they tell them that they can have whatever table they want and don't even have to wait. Chloe asks, now I believe this was Chloe, I'm not sure. I know there's Chloe, Kim, and Courtney. I don't know which one is which, but whatever. I'm going to say this is Chloe. Chloe asks him if he thinks Simpson did, and he says that they know their uncle would never hurt anyone. And Kim says that Kris thinks he did, and Robert says that she's very emotional right now since they lost Nicole, but she shouldn't be talking to them about these things, because, they just shouldn't be talking about it. And Kim says that the entire universe is talking about it, and people at school ask her about it, since he is her uncle, and he says Simpson is a good man, and he plans on telling the whole world that on TV since Barbara Walters called him. They talk about Bruce's success with the Olympics, which is very interesting, and he tells them, and I really like this scene here, he tells them that being a good person and a loyal friend is more important than being famous, and that fame by itself is nothing without a virtuous heart that they don't really seem to care. Even though he's telling them this advice, they don't really seem like they care. They're kids, they're not really listening, and I'm pretty sure this happened in real life. I mean, I don't know if he gave him this exact conversation in the exact way he did, but it seems like something the Kardashians would do. He'd give him a conversation, talking to him about this, and they wouldn't do a thing about it, because we know how the Kardashians are now. Do you really think they'd listen to something like this? No, they're not going to. I mean, this is the Kardashians we're talking about. They're not just going to listen to a conversation like this. They're not going to. So we then see some artists who are looking at, I think these were some artists. They're looking at Simpson's mugshot and thinking it needs something to add it more emotion and really make it look like the falling of an idol. Now what they do is very interesting. We'll get into this. Marsha's outside smoking, then throws the cigarette down to give a press conference. She says she's there to give her office's charges for Simpson's murder. Basically gives out all the facts that she thinks is, key to Simpson doing it. She thinks that all these facts just say, okay, he did it, and I think she did a good job with that. And basically, Simpson is watching this from prison. Hears this, not watching this. He hears it from prison because he is, in their headquarters. That's where he's locked up right now. And basically, Gil then congratulates her on presenting evidence, and she says that Simpson basically is doing the job for her by doing all these things. And they all thank her, and Bill says that a year ago she wouldn't have even been there. She was a supervisor, and she says Gil said that she must be the first civil servant to ask for a demotion, and she says she's headed back to the courtroom, and he calls her a trial junkie, which she thinks is better than sex. And we got some actually fun scenes with Marsha in this episode. Marsha clearly loves trials. She loves drama. She loves it. I definitely think that that's one of Marsha Clark's favorite things is going to trial. She loves doing it. That's why she is, in the that's why she is a district attorney. It's something that she personally loves, and I like seeing that. And when you have a job, you should be passionate about it, and I like seeing that here. So Shapiro's in his office, looks at the way the public is depicting Simpson, and slams his fist on the table in anger because, of course, no one is really seeing Simpson in a way that's defendable, and obviously this is a real problem. And so basically he decides to get F. Lee Bailey, which I knew was going to come into the picture because one, he's a main character. Two, he was a big part of this, and I like that we were introduced to this character. He's on the phone, who is played by Nathan Lane. It's great to see Nathan Lane here, but you probably wouldn't have noticed him because he's very unrecognizable in the show. He calls him and asks him how to tell his secretary to get him there, and he asks him how soon he can get there. Lee comes over. Shapiro says that he can't tell him how much he appreciates him dropping everything and flying out there. Lee says he wouldn't miss the party and asks how his family is, and Shapiro says everyone is good or bad, but he doesn't know, he can't think, and he tells Lee about the evidence that Marcia has on Simpson, and Lee says he had a client, Sam Shepard, and he ran because he was innocent. Everyone prejudged him, but he got him off. So the same thing could be going on with Simpson. He could have ran Ray because he was innocent, and definitely that is a possibility. I like that Lee's saying that, he's not necessarily guilty. This doesn't necessarily say he's guilty. This could show that maybe he's just a scared guy and he really didn't do any. He was just caught off guard. I mean, we don't know if he did. We still don't know, and I don't think the show is going to give us that answer of who really did it because, again, no one can really give that answer because we don't really know. But unless they've been been really questioning O.J. Simpson very carefully. I don't think they've been doing that, but basically, very interesting stuff there. And Shapiro says they have him down as the schmuck that will walk Simpson down to the gas chamber. Nothing more than the most famous lawyer in the country that is going to dictate it on Larry King, live Alan Dershowitz. And Shapiro asks how they shut him up. Lee says the only way is to hire him. So basically, they're going to work with Dershowitz, and we'll get into that. Gil tells Marsh that the trial will be better there, and they can't move the trial to Santa Monica because of the recent earthquake there. And he says it can fit everyone there the way that they can handle the press. That way they can handle the press and have their offices and resources down there. Plus, the objects are a lot better there. And he says he can't risk having an all-white jury, and he doesn't want to hear about Rodney King because he doesn't want to hear about it. I mean, he thinks it's bullshit, and it kind of is. I mean, if they have genuine charges against Simpson, Rodney King has absolutely nothing to do with this, and he really doesn't want to hear about it. This is clearly something he's heard about way too many times, and he doesn't want to hear about it here. And Marcia jokingly says that Simpson deserves it, and tells him downtown should be fine because she won 19 out of 20 homicide trials there. And he says they have a winning hand, they need to make everyone look good. And then we see Dershowitz arrives, and Robert is there as well, introduces them to Barry Scheck, the best DNA mind in the business, and they introduce him to Pat McKenna, their lead investigator. And Shapiro says that he made a reservation for lunch at Spago's, and Dershowitz says that he will have to skip it and just work through the afternoon. He's got a lot to cover, and he's got a 5:30 back to Boston. He says this is how it's going to work. He will come out often, but his main power is back at Harvard. I was just at Boston, so that was really cool. Dershowitz then gives him a walkthrough of how he feels about Shapiro's direction with the case so far, and it's very critical. I mean, Shapiro's saying that he really is criticizing him, but Dershowitz doesn't really see it that way. And you can tell that Dershowitz works a lot better than anyone else, works a lot differently than anyone else they've really worked with, and it's very interesting. I really like seeing this. Dershowitz tells him he has to move fast. His client is filled with popularity, and he even brings up his opinion about reading the letter. He thinks it's a horrible idea. I love Robert's line of just being like, I thought it was a good idea. I love that line. Thought that was really funny. And basically he says that it's depicting assets, and right now he is the handsome Greek god hanging low in a tragedy, but he's still a Greek god, and the longer he sits in that cell, the longer the public sees him in that jumpsuit, the more immortal he becomes, and that's the clock that they're fighting. And basically Robert says that he never stops being the juice, and Dershowitz says all the evidence supports the conclusion that Simpson did it, and Shapiro says they understand that, and to tell them something they don't know, and to suggest something, and Barry asks how much they they know about DNA evidence, and Shapiro says not much. And this was back when DNA tests were not very common. Technology was not the way it was today. You couldn't really get things as fast as you could now, so it makes sense why they don't really know about DNA as much. Nowadays, we're much more fluent with that stuff. We know a lot more about what DNA can do. I'm not saying we know everything to know about DNA, but we're just a lot more familiar with it than Shapiro is. And I thought this scene with with Barry here, I really did like seeing. And Barry asked, because Shapiro asked him some good questions, like, can they use it to show it to someone else? Obviously, we can't do that. And Dershowitz tells Barry to clarify his strategy. He says he's not going to contest the DNA matches. He's going to keep them out of court entirely. And if it can be shown that there may have been errors in the collection of hailing the samples used for the prosecution and Simpson's DNA analysis, they can contest the validity of the evidence itself and can even get the jury to question every idea, all evidence, and basically just get them to think, did he really do this? I mean, there's a lot they can do here. And Dershowitz says that he's going to get going, and Lee says he likes him. Shapiro asks Pat what he's got. He says all he's got is the LAPD acting like they were Simpson's butler, though he does know one of the detectives a little. Fuhrman comes back into the picture in this episode, where he worked, the first detective we ever met, Fuhrman. He says he worked with Johnny Carson, who never asked him back, and Shapiro tells him to dig deep and let him know what happens, and very interesting stuff we find out with Fuhrman. We'll get into this, but the DA then watches Shapiro give a press conference about what he's calling the Dream Team, and Marcia says that Shapiro's a seller, gets the big feed, cuts the deal, and doesn't go to trial, jokingly asks when the last time Lee won anything more than a drinking game, and one of the women says that Shapiro represented Lee in the longest drunk driving trial in history in 11 days, and that's pretty crazy, if that's, I'm sure that's true, because obviously these were real people, so that's pretty crazy to think about. And Bill says he didn't know that Robert was a lawyer. And Marcia says that they're just trying to buy Simpson out of trouble. And it's really sad. She says they sell their story before they testify. They got zero credibility in the stand. And they can't have cash for trash. And Bill says that they are just hardworking men trying to profit for the murder of two innocent people. And Marcia says it's vile, but they're welcome to do it after she's done with them. Because she's not done with them yet. It's clear that she's going to put up a fight and she's not going to let them do this. Because she can tell that they want the upper hand. They want to win, obviously. But they want to win as well. And she's convinced that they're going to win. So Johnny's wife, Dale, is cooking dinner, hears him reading over a speech for an NBC appearance. He says they're calling him the senior OJ analyst, and she says she's on his feet, taking in a room, putting up the jury in a bookcase like he does, and he says he's on the sidelines and they're going to lose, and he doesn't want to be part of that when it happens, and that's why he's not part of the case, because he knows that this case is a failure. He does not think this case is going to work, and he wouldn't feel good. We see a Time magazine showing Simpson's mugshot, and many people grab it, including Darden, and a man says they made him blacker, who everyone thinks is to make him look guiltier or something more innocent, and this is true. They actually did this. They made his picture darker, and Johnny says that it's racially insensitive, but the real injustice is the way police officers view blacks in LA, even after the riots, even after the Christopher Commission feels the LAPD culture has not changed. And Shapiro watches this and thinks, this is the way that we get the upper hand. This is the way that we will fight the DEA, because we can use this against them. And basically, Pat gives him files on Fuhrman, he says, and Fuhrman we find is a lot more complicated than we thought he did. He says he sued the city, basically claiming his duties as a cop made him a bigot, and gave him violent fantasies, and he describes eating up and attacking black people. And Shapiro says this is a gift and tells him to imagine that Simpson was set up by the cops because he was a black man, and because the LAPD has a racism problem, and he's then told that there's a reporter from the New York Magazine, so it's clear that Shapiro really wants to use this, because obviously this is how they win. And he wants to see him, who showed up without an appointment, and then tell his secretary to tell him it doesn't work that way, and he's very busy, but then decides he does want to see him, and to not let him go away. He meets with the reporter Jeff, who says that Dershowitz told him to look Shapiro up. He's doing a piece on cash or trash stories, but Shapiro says to do it on window dressing. Literally, he just shuts it down and says, no, I want you to do it on window dressing. He says not the story was told to cover, but it's clear that this is the story that Shapiro wants to tell, and this is very interesting, because again, he doesn't know know if this is the true story. He just wants to hope it is. And Shapiro says it's far-reaching implications. He's never seen anything like it, and tells a report about the LAP's supposed hatred for black men and Fuhrman's bigotry and how he thinks he might have been set up. And Shapiro says that they will show that it is impossible to get a fair trial with an LAPD when you're black. And Jeff asks if he's going to say it's about race. Shapiro says they are because it is, and he's simply just shedding a light on it. And it's clear that, despite if it's true or not, they're going to stick with this because it gets them the upper hand. It gets them the chance of taking down the LAPD, and, Shapiro will do anything to do that, obviously. He wants to take them down. So Marsha's at home, sees Shively on TV. Remember that witness that she talked to? And of course, she is pissed at her because she lied. She told them point blank, do not talk to anyone else about this. And that's exactly what Shively's doing. And she tells them that Shively's out. And basically, Gil says that she's her only eyewitness and she just lost all credibility. The jury won't believe. And the defense will portray her as a media whore, which she is. And they'll say that she just made it all up to score some quick money. And they don't even know if the story's true now. They don't even know. I mean, she could have just said it to get some money. And Bill says it's just a sleazy news show. Marsha says they paid her $5,000, a slippery slope from a hard copy to the National Enquirer to the Weekly World News. They need to set a tone. Gil says they've used witnesses before who did interviews for money. And she says if they don't take control, then the press can hijack all of it. And they'll end up spending time responding to them instead of focusing on things that matter. And tells them that they have all the aces and they need to hold the high ground because they need to be in control here because they're not in control right now and they need to be. So Simpson is brought into a room to see Shapiro, Lee, and Robert and asks them why any of the guys from the golf club don't come to see him, and he says he's losing it in there. They won't even let him shower, and they won't even let him shower. I mean, that's pretty crazy. And he asks them if anyone has looked into Faye Resnick yet for drugs, and this clearly is the person that Simpson thinks did it, is Faye Resnick. Very interesting. If you remember Faye Resnick, that woman that was talking to Kris Kardashian in the first episode, that's who he thinks did it. And Lee says they'll put an investigator in, and Shapiro says they need to add a litigator into the team and asks him about Johnnie Cochran, and Simpson very abruptly refuses. He's like, no, that's all wrong. Like, he's freaking out about it, and Shapiro says they need someone who can communicate to the downtown jury and adjust the conditions on their football field, and Simpson says they want to make this a black thing. That's why they want Johnnie, and he says he's not black, he's OJ. Now let's talk about this line, because from hearing this line, it is a little silly. But I think they're trying to show is that OJ doesn't see himself as a black man. He just sees himself as a celebrity. He doesn't see him as someone that's black. He doesn't really think about his culture. He thinks that he's a celebrity. He thinks he's OJ Simpson. And remember, he kind of left his culture to be a celebrity. So that's why he doesn't really see himself as a black man. So Johnny's with Carl working on something and is then told Simpson is calling for him. He looks very terrified because we know that he doesn't want to be involved with this case. He said that it's going to fail and he's really scared. And he then sits down. Simpson says he needs him from jail, but very quickly realizes this is a prank call, tells his secretary to next time screen the damn call, and honestly a pretty funny scene. The guy on the line, didn't even sound like Simpson. He sounded like Michael Jackson, actually. And, it probably stuff like that happened. I would not be surprised if something like that happened, especially in a big case like this. I would not be surprised about that. And then we see Kato, who we haven't seen in, since the first episode. He's running with his friend and tells him his beeper goes off 50 times a day and thinks you get an audition for something. 3 girls pass by, lift up their shirts and tell Kato that they love him. Then 2 guys pass by, yell at him for being friends with Simpson and tells his friend it's very complicated and he doesn't really know what to do. He was tight with the Simpsons, but really doesn't know what role he plays now because, Simpson's in jail. He doesn't really know what to do here, and that's what's very interesting. So Darden goes to Marsha. As we know, Darden does work at the DEA, but he's been very insignificant, and this is the episode where Darden really does start to get involved, and I really like seeing that. He tells her he got a call from Jeff asking him about Fuhrman, and he knows he's a key witness, and he thought that she should know. She tells him to shut the door because she needs a break. She smokes and asks him what he thinks about the case, and he says it's pretty bulletproof and strong and interesting, and a lot of black people think that he didn't do it, and he just feels they just don't want to to be true. And I like that Kris, that Kris Darden, not Kris Kardashian, that Darden is on the other side of this. He doesn't think that this is a black thing. He thinks that this is them just not wanting to admit that OJ could, that Simpson could do such a thing. And Marsha's shocked, and she says he wasn't a pillar of the black community. And even if it were, would it be the same facts? It would be the same facts. And he says he hears her, but right now it is an emotional thing, not rational. And I think that really is what it's about. They don't want to think that Simpson could do this, so they're trying to find ways where he couldn't. Now, Shapiro, all that's their job. They have to try to defend him. And he says that she wouldn't understand since she never gets emotional about her cases, and I think this is going to be the first one that really does affect her. I think this is definitely going to affect her. I mean, think of everything that she's doing. Definitely, I think that's going to happen. So Robert goes to the Kardashians' house, and Kris answers and says to wait there, and she'll get the kids, and he asks what's wrong. And again, I was fine with this scene. This scene I really do like. I like the girl that plays Kris Kardashian. I have no problem with this. The kids, like I said, are annoying, but I have no problem with Kris Kardashian. She says that they have a movie to get to, and she doesn't want to get into this right now. He says they don't do stuff this way, and she agrees. She steps outside, and she basically thinks that he's turning their back on Nicole and the family because he's still friends with Simpson, and she doesn't even really trust Simpson. She says that everything about him is fake, and she doesn't even see him as their uncle. She just thinks everything about him is pretend, and that he really shouldn't ally with him. But this is his best friend. He's not just going to betray him, obviously, but Kris is basically telling him to choose his family over Simpson, which he should, but it's just he's so close to Simpson, and Simpson kind of needs him that he can't get away from it. It's just that simple. So Marsha asks Darden if AC is aiding and abetting, and he says it's complicated. On one hand, he was a driver of what looked like Simpson's gateway time. Now, if you guys know what that means, it means did he help Simpson commit this crime? That's what it means. And he asks why she's asking, and she says that they're thinking of pressing charges, and she thinks that he's the one to run with it. And he says he hasn't been in the courtroom in a long time, and she tells him to quit hiding in the basement. She says she knows he can do it, and she says she knows it doesn't seem like much now, but it could be crucial to proving Simpson's intent and guilt, and he agrees to it. So finally, Darden has something to do. He's not just going to sit by himself in an office. He's actually going to do something significant, and I really like seeing that. I'm glad that Darden now has something to do. Like I said, I knew he was going to get something to do, and I'm glad he got something now. So she's then told by her secretary, they see that they have released the 911 tapes of Nicole calling the police, which I'm pretty sure were the real 911 tapes, because you have to think they obviously did release them in real life. So I'm assuming that these were the real 911 tapes that we heard. And the man in the background sounds very much like Simpson, but they're not. They're from Simpson being his wife. That's what they are. They're from Simpson being his wife. And Marcia is exactly what she feared. Her witnesses are on TV. Her evidence is on TV. It's all there, and there's not really much they can do. And Bill says that they'll come through. They have enough evidence to win. And when Shapiro sees what they got, he's going to roll over and play dead. Lee reads the latest issue of the New Yorker. He tells Shapiro he has big brass balls, and they're back in this thing. And Shapiro thanks him, asks him how they get rid of those 911 tapes. And Lee says he's not worried about them. He says this is an entire case strategy, spectacular and masterful. He says he had a car that flew off a cliff, yet somehow he got them back on the hill, and they put up a fight. He's glad that he did it, and he's glad to be on the case with them, and I like seeing that. Even though, maybe they're not doing the best thing, I like seeing them succeed. It's interesting to watch, definitely, because it makes things more interesting. Because Marcia asks what it is about this case every time she thinks they're bearing. Bill thinks it's crazy that they're going racial, and Darden says he thinks it could stick, and Bill says that no one is really going to buy into it. But remember all those neighbors that Darden has? They believe it, so he thinks that people would believe it. And Marcia says that this move may be sleazy and cynical, but it may work, and she says they need to stop looking at it as a slam dunk, and it's a declaration of war. They need to step up. They need to find something that the lawyers don't have. And basically, it's now an all-out war pretty much between DEA and lawyers, which I really do love seeing. So Robert reads the paper to him, and Simpson is outraged at what they're claiming. Robert says it could explain a lot the glove and Fuhrman, and why not do everything they can to get him out of there. And he says he just wants to go home, be with his children, do everything he can to find the killer. And Shapiro says the 911 tapes that are released is an audio recording in which the world can hear him being his wife, and he can't come back from that. He can't really do anything, and he can't make it better, because those are are real. He can't say those aren't real. Those are real. And Shapiro says that he can't fix this. He says there's hope, and the race defense is the crux of their case. They need to bring in Johnnie, and they need to do it now. And his angle is the only angle that he will see daylight again. Johnnie gets another call, not really knowing if it's really Simpson, but this time, luckily, it is. It's not a prank call. And Shapiro tells Johnnie that he's always admired him and wanted to work with him for years. He says he feels a strong emotional connection to this case, and Shapiro says that he's glad he feels this way, but he requests that he will remain lead counsel. And Johnnie says that this case could accomplish a lot of important things, and he says before he comes on board, he needs to look into Simpson's eyes and needs to believe him, because, and I think it's a good way to go about it, because he needs to know if who he's working with is innocent or not. If this really is about race, he needs to know it's about race, and he needs to make sure. So I thought that was really great, and Johnnie does exactly that. He goes in the prison, he tries to see Simpson. Johnnie gives him a hug, asks him if he's alright. Simpson says he's not, tells him to sit down and to talk to him. Simpson says whatever he decides to do, and whatever side he's on, he needs to know that he loved Nicole more than he could possibly imagine. She was the mother of his children, and he didn't do it. Nicole was the center of his world, and he says he has to believe him, and Johnnie says he does. He's gonna get him out of there, but he needs him to stay strong. He needs to see the strength that's in him, and if it's not enough, then he can have some of his. And Johnnie says they get one black judge, then he gives him a hung jury, and when he gives him that, which means basically a, decided jury, that it's unanimous, and when he gives him that, then he's going home, and it's clear that Johnnie is the person to help him out here, definitely, and I like seeing that. I like seeing Johnnie really wants to help him out, and he's very passionate about this, you can definitely tell. So then we get the end of this episode, which was crazy. Marcia puts her son, Travis, to bed, goes outside to smoke. She looks at the newspaper that says Dream Team deepens the case and sees that Cochran is now involved, and she screams, motherfucker, and basically that's how the episode ends, which I can't believe that FX actually said that. I don't think they've ever said that, but they did here. And amazing episode, guys. Really great episode. Like I said, I really like that at this point it seems to be DEA versus lawyers. My big question is, what can the DEA do that the lawyers don't have? I mean, it's clear that they want to put up a fight, but what really can they do here? I mean, they are completely against the lawyers, and the lawyers are really beating them at this point. I mean, they now have Johnnie Cochran. They now have, Alan Dershowitz. They have pretty much everyone that they need, and the DEA just doesn't have that, and I think Marcia's realizing that they could lose, and she really doesn't want them to, but what can they have? And we know, of course, what the final defense is going to be. If you guys probably know what happened to Simpson, but again, how are they going to put up a fight here? Really, what's going to happen? I think we're starting to see how the final verdict came to be. Definitely, we're starting to see that, and if this really is a race thing, especially, that's going to be very interesting to see what's going on there. Johnnie seems like he really does want to help Simpson, so we'll have to see what happens with that. But as we know, Johnnie and, Shapiro, Johnnie does not really like Shapiro. I think he's really only taking on this case for Simpson because he's very passionate about these kind of things, and he really wants to help him out. And I really think it has nothing to do with Shapiro. He doesn't really care about him, and we'll have to see what happens there, because that definitely is going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. Fuhrman. Is Fuhrman going to, be questioned? I'm sure that Fuhrman is a top suspect. Did Fuhrman really frame Simpson? I mean, it's a crazy story, but if he really is as racist as they think he is, then he could have very much done it. I mean, if he's saying he would eat black people, I mean, that's pretty crazy. It really is. So we'll have to see really what happens there. It definitely is going to be very interesting to see what goes on with that. Robert, it's clear that he cares about Simpson. He's not going to get away, despite what Kris tells him. He's not getting away from Simpson. Simpson is his closest ally. He's his best friend. They've been friends since they were... I think they've been friends since they were children. I don't really remember, but, they didn't really say in the show. But we know that that Simpson's best friend. He's not going to get away from him, and there's nothing that Kris can really do about that. And even though Kris wants him to, he can't really do anything there. And, let's talk about Darden. What is going to happen with Darden and his claim on the, on AC? Is it going to work out? Is it going to be valid? And is this Darden's way to doing more? Because Marcia wants him to do something significant. I like seeing that. I like the dynamic between Darden, Marcia, and like the rest of the DEA. I think that's a really good way to go about this. And I like that he has chosen a side. Remember, Johnnie said choose a side. He's now chosen a side. He's sticking with the DEA, and I love seeing that. Overall, guys, great episode. Really loving the show. Every week I look forward to this show, and it never disappoints, I have to say. And this by far Taylor. I mean, I'm just loving the show. Really great episode. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. I really loved it, and I will see. And also, Faye Resnick, is Faye Resnick a possible suspect? Because as we know, Simpson thinks that she could have been involved with this. We don't really know. But that's it for my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys saw this episode, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for Pretty Little Liars, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.